Those being the top housekeeping rules, if you have any other needs or questions about how this is going to work, let us know in the chat. We're going to do a quick round robin of pieces of self-advocacy that we want to address. And then we're going to come to our quick discussion of some high-level topics between the three of us, which will be very casual. And then we'll open up to questions and give you the best answers that we can come up with. There's a lot that we're going to cover today. And I'm going to kick it off with what is self-advocacy in terms of the digital accessibility space, and what are we actually talking about? This was a tough meeting to articulate to one another, and we met about it ahead of time and said, what are we really going after here? When I say self-advocacy, what I really mean is, as an end user in today's language, digital accessibility is largely governed by developers, coders, accessibility professionals, people with a lot of web accessibility experience, a lot of technicalities, a lot of code speak, a lot of things that seem outside the grasp for the average end user that I work with as a technology instructor, who knows how to operate a screen reader or magnification tool, but doesn't necessarily understand the ins and outs and intricacies, especially as things update every few weeks to 6 months, especially as the robust idea of the web accessibility guidelines changes to keep up with emerging technology trends, but also tries to accommodate the older things. It's hard to be a self-advocate because there are so many things changing, and they're so driven by code, and they're so driven by legality. And so the one thing I will tell you is, when you find something that isn't working, you are the end user and you find a thing you cannot interact with. And I'm very purposefully refraining from using web language or technical language in this conversation, because that's not what the end user speaks. Tough truth for some of the coders on this call. I love you. I speak your language, but today I'm not gonna, because that's not the language that I use when I'm working with end users, because they don't speak it. When you come across a thing that isn't working, which is usually how it gets identified by the end user, you're gonna run into a situation where you have to figure out, is this a user error? Is this a bug that lives in the operating system or on the website? Or is this a bug that lives in the assistive technology? Or is this a bug that lives in your brain and you just haven't learned what to do with that particular web element or thing that's not working? And it is very easy for us to blame the system. It is very easy for us to turn this into an argument. But you're advocating against a system. You're advocating against a process, not a person, unless that person is intentionally discriminating against you. You're advocating against a system. It's easy for us to let our emotions color our advocacy. And in many cases, we need to say there is an emotional response to advocacy. We don't like to talk about the emotions in tech, but we have to. There is an emotional response in advocacy, and we need to say that is a good thing to acknowledge. But if we're going to get into an argument with a frontline customer service representative that we're reaching out to inform that something's not accessible to us today, that person probably is not going to have the resources, the authority, or the power to change the actual code of the website if it is a web accessibility error. So they're not the one against you. The frontline customer service rep can take information, but may not be able to execute a decision-making capacity toward changing the accessibility. And so how to get to the person who can make that change is part of advocacy, knowing how to climb the ladder and not escalating the situation by speaking to a manager, but knowing how to reach the person using LinkedIn resources, research on Google, who is an authority figure at that company who may be able to make that big change that you're seeking. If the accessibility error is not intentional, how do you meet someone telling you, no, I can't make this accessible for you, with a solution that works for you? Using education, explanation, using your needs as the driver for the explanation of why you are seeking accessibility. We can use WCAG, we can use the law, but when you use, I need to pay my taxes, I need to buy food, I need to pay my rent, that's a powerful reason in and of itself. That doesn't mean we don't use the law. It's there for a very good reason. And I want to be very clear, lawsuits have their needs, have their reasons, but what we want to talk about today is the advocacy that grows in our own hands and the power that we have. We have been pushed to the edge of the Supreme Court twice in the past 12 months, and our civil rights have been put in the balance of what people at the Supreme Court level would do with them. And that's not me. And I'm a huge proponent of the disability adage, nothing about us without us, nothing about me without me. Thank you very much. I would like to know that those laws that were put in to protect my civil rights are going to be upheld. And right now I don't know that because it's not in my hands. Advocacy puts it back in my hands. So I want to highlight, use your needs to get across what you need in terms of a solution, what you need in terms of a company's involvement in accessibility. It is the right thing to do, is not the right thing to say. It is what stands between me and being able to pay my rent, is a very power-driven statement. Use your needs to drive your accessibility. When you are equipped with training, resources, and offers of solutions to people rather than just problems, you accelerate the engagement for solution. So know what's out there to help you resource the business. Know of a diversity of solutions. There are a wide array of accessibility options and solutions today. Not all of them are expensive, litigious, or complex. Knowing what to offer somebody as a starting point, as a jump off point, is critical. So we're going to go over solutions and ideas that are available to you, and doing your own due research on this is imperative. Get connected to the community and know what's out there to help you drive your own advocacy and what you offer to a business. They'll probably go with their own thing down the line, but if you can direct them more and more toward our community, meaning the disability community and the accessibility community, then we're probably going to get a better solution than if they just go out there and start Googling for the first thing on the web that they find. In an ideal world, everyone is familiar with accessibility. Everybody implements accessibility. We know we're not there yet. Being proactive, persistent, willing to participate personally, patient with the process, and concise and consistent in your statements is critical. That's a lot, and I will go over it again. Being persistent, patient, personally willing to participate in the process, and consistently concise about your statements is a critical 5-step process of advocacy. I keep those processes in my head when I do my own self-advocacy as a person with multiple disabilities. And anytime I'm checking a no box on any of those, such as being personally willing to participate in the experience, I start looking outside of me and who can take it on that's part of the community or another resource out there. We're not doing this alone. There are other advocates alongside us. There are other organizations and systems that can help support us in our work here. And if you're starting to hit a burnout point, and you can't personally be part of the process that you're asking a business to engage in, know who and where there are resources to step in and help. When you're encountering something that is not accessible, I say use usability first, because accessibility is part of usability, and usability is part of accessibility, but you are the end user. Unless you are an accessibility professional, use usability first and speak a statement of truth as you're experiencing it. UX is part of his whole process for a reason. User experience is a driver here for a reason. So if you are an end user and you do not have deep information as to the code, the design, whether it's a bug or a user error, don't let that stop you from being a good self-advocate. Use usability. I cannot use this today. Red light, I cannot use it at all. Yellow light, I can kind of use it, but I need some sort of third-party remediation to help me use it, such as a visual interpreter or that always ubiquitous, get somebody sighted to do it for you if you're in the blind camp like myself. Yeah, no, let's not do that. use usability, and green light is I completely can access or use this on my own with no assistance other than my assistive technology. Use usability to help you advocate. Assessment and determination are going to be your factors here. Assessment as to when it's a user error, check with your community. Are other people experiencing the same problem on the same website? Use locations, addresses, performance of task. What were you doing when you found out you couldn't do it? It was the CAPTCHA that held you up. It was the calendar. It was the drop down. It was what was the process you were actually engaged in using, or the element that you were engaged in using when you couldn't continue forward with accessing something, and start there. Put it out to the community, to your peers, to other individuals using the same assistive technology. If you're still getting that all of you are having the error, chances are that it's probably a web bug. Most of us who are versed in accessibility know when it's a web error, when it's a user error, when it's an assistive technology error, and can distinguish the difference. Not always. Even those of us who are deeply involved in accessibility sometimes get tripped up on this. So have a good system of people in your camp who can help you identify what you're contending with, then approach the business and let them know for sure that it's a web bug. They may have to do some of that work on their end. It's okay to let them own that. But the more that you can identify whether the error lives on your brain, in the assistive technology, in the operating system, or in the web, it'll help you on the web that the company owns. It'll help you. Lastly, I want to kind of really highlight to you the emotionality of self-advocacy. They're going to offer solutions that don't meet your needs. Remain focused on your needs. Remain focused on what the law allows us to do, what the web content accessibility guidelines allow us to do. And the more self-information you have about this, the better. But know that a huge process of being an advocate is listening to their side of the story. If I approach a business and say you're not accessible, that business is going to have X amount of resources to allocate to this process. That does not absolve them of the need to be accessible. It offers us opportunities to look at different ways of implementing accessibility that are scalable to their needs and my needs at the same time. And being a good advocate is me being aware of where they sit in that process. If they're willing to share, if they're willing to come to the table and talk about their business location in terms of their resources, their needs, the more I can listen and be aware of my boundaries and needs and their boundaries and needs, and the more that we can put those two together to get both of our needs and goals met, the better that advocacy is going to go. But it requires being very self-aware. It requires lots of emotional awareness, of understanding, patience, empathic listening, confirmation, and being willing to be part of the negotiation process. That is advocacy. Advocacy can be, this isn't working for me, you need to fix it, step away, let it go, use another business because it's not accessible. But largely, if you stick with the process, it's just listening to the other side and realizing that you're not on opposite sides. If the business is willing to come to the table and work through without it having to go litigious, then it's listening, it's finding what works, it's discovery, it's opportunity, and it's engagement. Having the business community know that disabled people are not here to be a problem. We're not here to be an accommodation. We're not here to be litigious. We're here to advocate and get our needs met so we can participate in society on our own terms and use self-determination to get our needs met. That's what advocacy is about to me. And when we have to use a lawsuit because that's where we've been driven because advocacy wasn't successful, that's what it's there for. It isn't there to be step one. It isn't there to be the only thing. And I, as a disabled person, am not here to be somebody's fear-based letter of notice that there's a problem. I am not a problem. I'm a person. And if I want to be treated as such, it's time I take my advocacy back into my own hands and pull my community around me and do this for myself as myself. That is the definition of autonomy, and that's what I'm here to do. I will turn it over to Tai. Tai, do you want to talk about kind of resources in the community that are available very quickly? And then we'll turn it over to Lainey to talk about the negotiation process.
Sure, sounds great. So as Sassy talked about earlier, I think one of the greatest resources we have is our community and reaching out and talking about how other people have solved issues that came up. How did other people deal with this? Certainly you want to, navigate the emotionality of that and maybe not take everything at face value, because sometimes when we post on social media, we're a little upset. So take a minute and figure out your approach to the situation, what your needs are, like Sassy talked about, and then maybe look up some resources. The ADA National Network is a good one. They're at adata.org, and they have 10 regional centers that can give you some advocacy assistance, what they call technical assistance. Similar to that, there are also quite a few places that sometimes engage in legal work, but can also just give you information. They're not going to make you go into legal proceedings if you don't want to, but they will help you. These are places like the National Disability Rights Network, network of protection and advocacy agencies. Those are in every state and territory and can help you out. If you have a situation, they can kind of give you some more information about how you might proceed, how you might move forward with that on your own. Similarly, maybe local independent living centers can do some similar work and help you feel empowered to push forward and do those kinds of things. There's all kinds of stuff on the web if you want to get into the technical side of it, but certainly that's, like Sassy said, you don't have to get into the technical side of it. You can just talk about your needs and what happened in your situation. But you certainly can look up the web content accessibility guidelines and some of the work that the W3C has done. There's quite a few different organizations that put out a lot of information. I'm sure we might get into some of that more. But certainly your social media contacts may be the greatest source of assistance and greatest resource for you to move forward. You can also look up different information on Google, different case law. You can explore a little bit how the civil rights laws work, how the ADA works. But I would say some of these national and regional networks can really be helpful for you in exploring your options. And you definitely don't have to move forward with any kind of legal action in order to work with them. So I would definitely encourage looking up those. There are 10 regional centers all over the country, and like I said, there are advocacy centers for all 50 states and all the territories. So that's a very brief overview. I can go into more detail, or we can move on and we can come back to some of these later.
I think we'll come back to a lot of them in the questions because there's a lot of information out there and
Yeah.
there's a lot of misinformation. Yes, even in the
Agreed.
digital accessibility sphere, there's a lot of misinformation.
Yes.
So anytime that it's connected to the government, to the independent living centers, that's a trusted source of information. But be careful where you get your information. And if
Agreed.
you have any questions about where you get your information, check with the advocates, check with the people involved in the disability organizations. Largely, we can be a good source of an array of resources rather than just one. It's always good to have multiple resources. Check your references, check your resources, research, and know.
Oh, and I failed to mention consumer agencies and consumer groups and agencies. Yes. There's our huge resources as well. So,
yep. Thank you, Tai. I really appreciate it. And we will put resources in the chat and send out a follow-up email to this call to those who registered with this information, with links and resources and tips and some of the steps that I covered before. So use what works for you in that situation and feel free to let us know if you need more information. Lainey, can you talk about once you've hit that process of reaching out to a business and entering negotiation, how that whole process can play out and how a lawyer might figure into that process in terms of when it's advocacy, when it's bringing in a lawyer into the process and how that whole step would work?
I can. Thank you, Sassy and Tai, for inviting me into this conversation. I'm glad to be here. I've many great conversations so far. It's percolated many things, and I made some notes. For those of you who don't know me, my name's Lainey Feingold. I am a disability rights lawyer, but I don't give legal advice in public talk. So anything I say, please don't think of it as legal advice. I do have a website though, and I'm going to put it on that resource list. My website is lflegal.com, and I see myself as sort of a bridge between what the law is saying about accessibility and the people who need to know what the law is saying, who aren't lawyers. So I try to write everything in plain language, and I invite you to check out. I have a lot of legal stuff. And I also talk about structured negotiation, which is the way I've used the law to advance digital accessibility since the mid-90s. And so many of the things that Sassy and Tai have said have played into this process called structured negotiation. I have written a book about it. It's called Structured Negotiation, a winning alternative to lawsuits. That's available where we can get a book, and it's on Bookshare, and it's an accessible ebook on Kindle and other places. But in writing the book, I bring up the book first, not as a sales pitch, but to say that when you write about, the first edition came out in 2016, and the new edition, second edition, came out last fall. When you kind of try to take 20 years and put it into a book, certain themes appear. And one of the main themes that appeared, I want to share a couple of them with you, is what Sassy said about sharing your story. Structured negotiation is a way that, as a lawyer, yes, my clients have legal claims, but instead of filing a lawsuit, we go to a company and we say, there's a problem here, and here are the people experiencing the problem. And the process has been successful. There's a high-level navigation on my website where you can see all the cases I've been involved with. And in my book, I talk about cases other people have been involved with. The just like core reason it's been successful is because it's a way that the disability community has a seat at the table with decision makers to solve problems. And I think that strategy of storytelling, it doesn't have to be in the context of a lawsuit or a lawsuit alternative. There are things that we can use all the time. And I just wanted to read you one thing one lawyer said that I interviewed for my book. And she was with a big company, credit reporting company. And most of my work has been representing the blind community. I've done a lot of work with the American Council of the Blind, individual blind people. And we had a meeting, and we had a lot of blind people at the meeting, people who, someone used a braille display, and someone used JAWS, and someone needed hard copy braille. There was like a whole mix of people. And one of the people is a woman named Lori Gray, who some of you may know. She's in the Bay Area, and she has neuropathy. So she used to be able to read braille, but because she can no longer, she needed audio. And about 6 years after this meeting, the lawyer for the company gave me this quote, which said, "Disability awareness is now in the DNA of our company, in part because we remember dealing with your individual clients. I remember Lori Gray, who couldn't use braille and needed audio format. I will never forget her. And I've often told the story of that meeting to others in the company. They will never forget her either." We can create those types of meetings in advocacy easier when you're working with a community organization and you're not just your own self, but even your own self. You know, another example, just like 2 months ago, I was talking to a lawyer about a meeting that we had with this company like 5 years ago. And one of our clients was using a braille display, which, for those of you who don't know, it connects to a computer, and the website appears with refreshable braille. So if you read braille, you can get the content to the website. This lawyer told me like 6 years after the meeting, that was the most holy shit moment of my career, seeing a blind person try to navigate the website using a braille display. So as much as we try, and as successful as Global Accessibility Awareness Day is, people are still not aware. So the more, like Sassy and Tai were saying, we can tie the advocacy to our individual needs and individual stories. Two other negotiating things that I've used that I think are useful, whether you're in a law situation or not. One is this image I like of a cat looking in the mirror and seeing a lion. And I say that because whoever you're talking to, it could be the biggest company, it could be the smallest mom and pop, they see themselves in a certain way. First off, they see themselves as good people. Even in gigantic companies, we've done structured negotiation settlements with Walmart and Bank America. And it really taught me that, yes, there's big companies, they have policies, they do things, but the person reading your first communication is a person. And how you impress or don't impress, how you scare or don't scare, how welcoming you are to that person is going to make a difference. So this cat lion thing really works today because, especially with big companies, you can go on a website and you're going to find language that supports accessibility. You're going to find them saying, we believe in diversity and inclusion. Well, there's no diversity and inclusion if disabled people can't use your technology. So I like that cat lion thing. And the other one I want to say is about fear. I have a picture I use in presentations that says, fear is a liar. In writing the book, I found so many stories that we were able to break. I didn't want to talk too long, but I'm going to finish this story. So I set myself for 7 minutes, but I'm going to use about 2 more. People are afraid of many things. And if we don't take the time to actively listen and see what those fears are, what is blocking accessibility, then we're going to have a much harder time of achieving accessibility. So, for example, I started my work in this space working on talking ATMs. The bankers were afraid that if a blind person went to a machine and listened and got money, they would be mugged. In an adversarial setting, I would be arguing to a judge, that's not fair, blind people have autonomy. And then the bank would be arguing, we're afraid and we've had 5 muggings in the last, whatever. But when you're in a relationship, which is really what the point of advocacy is, even though you're mad, like I really want to echo what has been said about emotionality. You can feel really emotional. You can feel angry. You can feel annoyed. You can feel frustrated. But I like to say, we got to focus those emotions on the end goal. So even if we think it's like so rude for a banker to tell a blind person that they should be afraid to get money out of a talking ATM, we need to understand what that fear is and recognize it. And the best way to do that, I've seen the light bulbs go off in so many heads, is to bring people together. And when the bankers, we were successful in the Talking ATM initiative, and I tell this whole story of why and how, but the key reason is because the bankers got to know blind people and they saw people as their whole selves, and they realized this person can't get $20 out of our machine. That's not right. We need to fix that. Same with talking prescription labels. The pharmacists were afraid, oh my God, what if a blind person hears the information wrong and they take something and they get sick? And again, we thought, like, are you kidding? Right now, you're giving a blind person a bottle with a print label. They can't read anything. But it was a true fear of the pharmacist. And we could break that down because the members of the blind community who were part of those negotiations were able to say, you know what, right now, I have to keep 1 bottle in the kitchen with 1 rubber band and another bottle in the bathroom with 2 rubber bands. That's not safe. And the pharmacists were in it for safety. So they understood it. So understanding people's fears, I think, is something that benefits advocacy no matter what. And in just 1 minute on the lawyer, at some point, you may feel you want a lawyer, and we are lucky to live in the United States where we have very strong civil rights laws supporting accessibility. And we have really ethical, wonderful lawyers enforcing those laws. Unfortunately, we also have another category of lawyers who, like Sassy said, may be using this law and sending a letter and generating fear, which is the opposite of solution. So if you think you need a lawyer, I think the most important message I can share is that it's kind of advocacy. You have a right to have a lawyer you feel comfortable with, who you know is going to serve your needs, who you should ask questions to. Can I see the demand letter? Can I talk to some other of your clients? I'd like to see who you are. Because if you just go on Google, I hate to say it, these people, they take out advertisements. The first things you see are names of lawyers you may not want to work with. So it's really the choosing the lawyer. You know, does a lawyer want to collaborate? Does a lawyer want to try negotiations? You know, most lawyers will send a demand letter, and sad to me, there are some of these people who now send demand letters that say, we want to do structured negotiations with you, and if you don't give us what we want in 5 days, we're going to sue you. You know, they're just kind of taking our language. But a true so-called demand letter, I don't use the word demand because language is an important advocacy thing too. Like, you know, are you demanding something, or are you explaining your need so the need can get met? So it's really important to know that you have power when selecting a lawyer and talking about what it's going to cost. And what kind of results has a lawyer gotten before. One of the red flags on much of the ADA litigation around websites is we don't know what the settlements are. You know, an ethical lawyer, you know, sometimes you have to settle things confidentially, but when you're talking about public websites, there should always at least be a statement, you know, this company committed to this, whatever. So, you know, if you need a lawyer, it's nothing to be ashamed of. It's great. We live in a country that has laws that we can enforce, but be a smart consumer when looking for a lawyer. So with that, Sassy, I'll give it back to you.
Thank you. I will add to that. It's a job interview. Doctors and lawyers, interview them. They're working for you.
That's a better way to say it.
Yeah. I've gotten good at that, interviewing medical team members. If you don't feel like you're going to fit in well on my team, sorry, you don't get the position. I am an MD or a JD does not mean that person has exaltation over you and power over you. It means they're a player on your team. So choose wisely as such, but choose when you need them. Lawsuits are there for a reason. What they're not there to do is fear. I love that fear is a liar. They're not there to engender fear about disability. Lawsuits are there to get our needs met. And I think that's a big thing that's happening right now is lawsuits are being used to intimidate, to create fear. Very rarely in digital accessibility is it an intentional discrimination. It does happen. I have seen it, but largely it is people not knowing, people not understanding the resources that they have, and people really struggling to implement the solutions because WCAG, while it is wonderful, is big and complex and tough, and code is constantly changing. I saw one of my favorite people on here earlier, Adrian, can attest, I think, a lot. I'm calling you out. Sorry. I love you. Fear, code is complex and hard, and people can accidentally miss one character and you've got a mess. So thank you, Adrian, for indulging me. I appreciate it. You know, code, if you miss one character on accident and you were not drinking enough coffee on your coffee break and you just got it wrong on accident, it can create an accessibility problem. So where is the grace in the space that we do these negotiations with, that somebody just made an accident and it somehow slipped through monitoring and became an accessibility error in somebody's life? Oftentimes it's a bigger issue. And I want to address 3 quick questions to our group and just discuss for about 10 minutes as people, Lainey and Tai, and feel free to jump in the chat if you have a comment to add here. And then I'll open it up to questions at around 10 of the hour. And we can kind of see if the community has questions or keep the people panel going. The first question I'll put out to the 2 of you, beautiful people. And I'm sorry I did not do introductions at the beginning. I was scrambling to get on here and completely missed that. So thank you for introducing yourself, Lainey. I appreciate it. The first panel question that I'll put out is one that we each a little bit addressed, but I think one that can have a deeper answer, which is, for accessibility professionals, how can we be more deliberate about including end users, not in testing or QA where we usually put them, but in solutions, in development? And how can we make sure that the end user feels like they have a seat at the accessibility table? Lainey, you touched on this a little bit in terms of getting the user known to the people experiencing the issues at the end. But in the words of a mobility instructor friend of mine, thumbs up to Brandon Cox, sending you love again. Any good mobility instructor is going to start with 3 questions. Where are we? Where are we going? And how do we get there? So I think we're in the, where are we as we're not getting digital accessibility met. Where are we going? We want digital accessibility to be inclusive in our culture. How do we get there? I think a huge part is how can the digital accessibility professionals on this call be more inclusive of end users in their process? Lainey or Tai, do either one of you have a comment there?
Tai, do you want to go?
Go ahead, you can go.
Well, they have this idea in tech of shift left, that accessibility has to be included, not when you're testing, not in quality assurance only, but when you are envisioning the idea, when you are designing. And often that's said in terms of accessibility needs to be considered there. I always will add disabled people need to be at the table there, as far left, because even, ideally, people with disabilities in the workplace in all those roles. But when not, it's really important to bring in a consultant who's disabled or partner with a community group. There's a lot of, I have a resource page on my website, lflegal.com/resource or resources, I always forget, with lists nonprofits who do this kind of work, groups like Perkins or the Lighthouse or American Printing House, different groups, bring them in early and often. And in terms of convincing management of the cost of that kind of thing, oh, well, we don't need the cost now because we don't really even know what we're building yet. Yeah, but if you don't bring in people with disabilities now, when the idea is an idea, it's going to cost a lot more down the road to remediate it. And then you start having that kind of relationship where you can have disability input throughout. So that's just one sort of thing that comes to mind.
I think you also had a really good point, and then sorry, Tai, I didn't mean to cut you off. I think you also had a really good point with talking about someone who used a Braille display and then couldn't and had to use audio. I think we look at assistive technology as a one disability type solution. And oftentimes, more and more these days, we're seeing people with multiple disabilities or health conditions that do intersect and do cause additional challenges with using what we currently have for access or assistive technology solutions. And WCAG, while great, is a set of technical specs. It's not a be-all, end-all solution for everything. Usability has to go far beyond what WCAG would tell you to do. It's not a pass-fail, it's an I can't, I can. And it's a question of how does the whole person show up to interact with that experience? And you're not going to get that just by following a set of tech guidelines. You're not going to get that by having one user test it who can speak only from their experience. You need UX, you need people with disabilities in UX, you need many disability and people type presentations to understand how it's going to interact with someone who's older, who's just losing their eyesight, for someone who's younger, who's got arthritis and blindness, someone who's older, who's got who's hard of hearing plus blind. You've got a whole breadth of experience to factor into the usability, and that has to be part of accessibility, and that's something WCAG can't cover for. And we need to be mindful of it and inclusive of it, even in our own practices with accessibility. So it's community involvement, it's asking, it's getting connected to the community, it's listening. When somebody pushes back on you and says that doesn't work for me, consider that a fail, and explore what you could do to remediate that. And be open to it. That's not a you fail, that's an it failed. Take that as a feedback piece like you would a tech spec feedback, and look at what you can do to incorporate more options. Tai, you wanted to add something?
Yeah, I was gonna just say that I agree with all of that, and I think it's important to have people with disabilities involved, as we, people who are creating these software, packages or websites, they're, creating storyboards from the beginning, and people with
Mm.
disabilities need to be involved in that whole entire process from start to finish as much as possible. And bringing in those focus groups is really important. And I think one of the reasons that that's important to talk to businesses about is because they don't really know what they don't know. Even that one person who has a disability doesn't know all the other things that need to be considered for everyone with other disabilities. They can only do their part, and we have to include other people to give us more information. And I do stress that usability component a lot, because we have a WCAG compliant websites all around, but they're not necessarily usable. So
Um, that perfectly lines up my next question. Thank you. We are right now in a world where businesses fear us because of a lot of the drive-by lawsuits that are going on, the troll lawsuits, overlays sprang up to meet those businesses' needs, and we know we didn't get our needs met. I don't want to open the giant can of worms that is drive-by lawsuits and overlays, but I do want to open up advocacy in this space. When a business fears you walking through the door because they think it's going to be followed by a demand letter. I had to access a business recently, and I called them and said, what you did for your website while you're attempting to meet accessibility isn't meeting my needs. I'd love to talk to you more about this. The first words out of the owner's mouth were, please don't send me a letter. Please don't sue me. And my jaw just dropped. I said, as long as you're willing to sit down and talk to me about how I can use your business and pay you to get what I need done, I have no intention of doing anything of the sort. And all of that is a misnomer and people using the disability community. What can an advocate do these days around all of this fear that's going around about these lawsuits and accessibility solutions that aren't getting our needs met, and businesses feeling like they succeeded, but our needs not getting met? How can a user, without creating more fear, say, I'm not getting my needs met? Lainey or Tai?
yeah, I think we too often come in with that anger, and of course our anger and upset and our sadness are justified, but I think we really need to have empathy for where that business is at, because they are experiencing fear. And we really need to listen. I think it goes back to what was talked about earlier, listening to them and their fears, and explaining, like, I'm not here to sue you. I'm here to come up with a solution that meets my needs and that helps your business in the future, so that you don't have the risk of dealing with other people. So I do think in some ways we kind of are quick to a more scorched earth solution, and we need to maybe listen a little bit and try to have empathy, even though we're struggling and we're angry, and with good reason.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, this is a really good question. And I have come down on the side of being an advocate who criticizes the drive-by lawyers. And I know that there are people who feel, well, they're using the ADA and the websites aren't accessible, and therefore it's a strategy like any other. I feel, and a couple of years ago, I was interviewed by the New York Times, and they asked me, well, there were 80 lawsuits filed against 80 art galleries in New York City over a 2-week period. What do you think? And I was like so stressed out because, I'm a plaintiff's lawyer, and I want to support the advocacy community that does lawsuits. So I forced myself to sit down, and there's an article on my website. If you search ethics, it will show up, where I just laid out all these factors that distinguish. You can't file 80 lawsuits in 2 weeks and serve the needs of disabled people for accessibility. I mean, I've barely done 80 lawsuits in 20, 80 structured negotiations in 20 years. So and those drive-by lawyers in my work, we start right out, if people don't know us, like, we're not those lawyers, and I want to suggest being very public about that. We're not those lawyers. We understand some people handle the ADA differently. That's not us. And I think that kind of transparency and honesty, I often have to give referrals about myself. Like, if you're wondering who I am, here's my LinkedIn, or here's my boss, or whoever it is, like, I'm not that. And please don't paint me like that. You know, I've heard people say the lawsuits or the overlays, they weaponize disability.
Mhm.
And I kind of feel that's true. And I think if we acknowledge it, it kind of lets the air out of the balloon that we are that. So I'm not saying that's for everyone, but that's where I've come down, being transparent and public about it.
Agreed. And I think the overlays came out of those lawsuits in large part to help the businesses get rid of those letters. And it was a second step to pushing on the rights of the disability community, by trying to satisfy the businesses without deeply checking in with the disability community about what worked and what didn't. And so my last question before we open it up to questions is a quick one. What do each of you feel we can do in terms of self-advocacy, not community advocacy? We're working on that, but self-advocacy when we show up into a business that's not accessible for us in the digital space. What can we each do to take back our power in 2022 and say, I'm here to get my needs met and to gain access and usability to your business, to your space? What makes it stick? A lot of criticism that lands on us around advocacy is asking never works, which I don't believe. But I think asking doesn't have the sticking power of a legal settlement or a lawsuit and a courtroom and a judge. So what makes our efforts stick in your mind in 2022? That is a good takeaway for someone from this meeting. What can they do to make their advocacy stick?
This is Tai. I think developing that relationship with the business and explaining why that business has value to you. You know, what is it that about this business that's so important to you, and why do you need it in your life? You know, what is it? How does it add to your community? And then, you know, how are you using it in your daily life? And what is your, obviously, what's your barrier to using it? And, you know, hey, I would love to talk to you collaboratively about solutions that we can find to make that work for both of us. So maybe asking them for their input instead of just saying like, here's what I'm going to do in a threatening way.
Mm-hmm. Be of value to the business. That's what I say is be a personal, have a personal connection, be of value, bring something to that business, and you know, help the business understand the contribution that you make to being of them, with them, and able to interact with them. We bring a lot, and that gets minimized in our current accessibility era today. But we are of value and we are of power, and it needs to be reintroduced. Thank you, Tai. Lainey?
I would just say the word persistence, which
Mm.
Sassy said before. An ask is only an ask. You have to keep going back and keep going back. And the other is patience. It feels counterintuitive to the idea of advocacy, but I love this Rumi quote that that says basically patience is not like sitting around. Patience is seeing the thorn and knowing it'll be a rose. You know, it's knowing that it takes time to do things. You can't come in and say, fix this tomorrow. When it's not fixed, you just like throw in the towel and give up. You know, you have to know that things take time. And just let's end this part with Tai's word, relationship, because to the extent we can make them, that's the ticket.
Persistent, patient, consistent, and concise relationship. Yes.
Yeah, we've seen that recently with just the ADA lawsuits that are happening,
Yes.
where the community got involved and said, hey, no, we don't want these things to go to the Supreme Court.
Mhm.
You know, get your stuff together, LA Community College, and you know, other things. CVS was one of them, you know,
Yep.
to get those things to stop. So those campaigns are really effective.
Every advancement that I can think of big consequence in the disability community over the past 50 years has come originally from a demonstration, a protest, as you call it, a campaign, an action of us, for us, by us, meaning people in the disability community. And so that's how we get things done. It is the only way we get things done, because we don't have a lot of power of the disability community sitting in high places, including DC. Thumbs up to Tammy Duckworth right now because thank you. But there are not many of us in positions of really high power. And that's why I go back to my disability leadership statement of the more we get that, the more we don't have to put on these huge campaigns and protests. It's hard to do those big campaigns and protests, and it takes a lot out of us to continually do it. And it also, there's a tone to it. Are we continuing to be the thing that's a problem to the business, or are we continuing to say disabled people aren't here to cause problems and to boycott you, but we are here to get our needs met? And if that does need to include, putting out to the broader world that you're not inclusive or accessible, how do we do that in a way that invites them to want to collaborate with disabled people and want us involved in their business? Or are they going to go to Congress and say, pass the ADA to get rid of this problem for us that disabled people are causing because we are expensive to accommodate? And that's just a reality. But that is a reality that we need to grapple with every time we take on one of these protests or campaigns, is how to get disabled people viewed in a positive leadership light rather than in a problem-centered, stigmatizing, fear-based light. I want to take the fear out of disability for businesses, and yet hold them firmly to the fact that they need to commit to inclusion and accessibility. That's a tough line to walk, but we need it, and we need to do it, and we need to be part of that as advocates so that we're not having to do another protest around the Supreme Court, because eventually we're going to go there and it's going to turn a tide for us one way or the other. I want to see it go our way, since those are our rights, not a business's rights. Thank you for that. All right, y'all, we passed time. I appreciate all of you being here with us and joining us. Hopefully we got some things to thank you, Australia. Appreciate that. I didn't get your name, but I caught Australia, so I'm calling you Australia. Please send me a kangaroo. I'd really appreciate a pet kangaroo, but yeah. Thank you all for being here and for participating. Please keep the conversation going on your social media channels, on your blogs, on your websites, in your brains. Keep thinking about advocacy, keep thinking about ways to keep our community cared for as we undertake the heavy work of being advocates. This isn't easy. There is an emotional cost. Keep supporting each other, keep leading, keep saying what you need to get your needs met. And let's keep turning the tide so this isn't fear. Fear does make lies and misinformation. Let's keep going toward our truth and our needs, and those needs getting met. Thank you to Lainey and to Tai for joining me. Thank you to our captioner crew. We really appreciate you being here to meet our accessibility needs. And thank you to Sean in the background, who has been hosting and helping and getting things off the ground, and for bringing this up, this idea up in the first place. We really appreciate it, all of you. Enjoy your day, and happy Global Accessibility Awareness Week. We appreciate it.